Ninth National Assembly assures of cooperation with the executive to take Nigeria to her next level of development.
Senate to begin consideration of bill to amend the Deep Offshore and Inland Basin Product Sharing Contract Act.
Federal government restates determination to make it creative industry a key player for development.
This is Good Morning Nigeria, and today we shall take an in-depth look at the 2020 appropriation bill.
The leaders of the two chambers of the National Assembly, Senate President Ahmed Lawan and House Speaker Femi Gbajabiamila, played host to President Muhammadu Buhari as he presented the 2020 appropriation bill of 10.33 trillion naira to a joint session of the 9th Assembly yesterday, Tuesday, the 8th of October.
That's right, Kinsley. The Senate had received official communication from President Buhari to present the 2020 appropriation bill before the joint session last week, Tuesday, exactly 1 week before the presentation yesterday. Finishing touches were made to the appropriation bill at the extraordinary Federal Executive Council meeting presided over by Mr. President on Monday.
Now, President Buhari, among other things in the course of the presentation, said that the receipts from VAT, that's value-added tax, in the last budget year did not meet expectations. The president also indicated that the draft finance bill proposed a VAT increase from 5%, which is currently the figure, to 7.5%, adding that additional revenues will be used to fund health, education, and infrastructure. Now, though items such as pharmaceuticals and some foods, including fish, white and brown bread, and others, will be exempted from the VAT increase.
Now, the budget made allocations of 125 billion naira to the National Assembly and 110 billion is earmarked to the judiciary. The budget to Human Rights Commission got an increase of over 50%.
Now, a further breakdown of the budgetary allocations to ministries, as stated by Mr. President, include the following. Works and housing, 262 billion naira. Then transportation, 123 billion naira. UBEC, that's Universal Basic Education Commission, 112 billion. Defense, 100 billion. Agriculture, 83, water resources, 82, education, 48 billion, health, 46 billion, and the Northeast Development Commission, 38 billion.
According to the president, the revenue generation estimated to fund the 2020 national budget is 8.155 trillion naira. 2.64 trillion naira of that money is expected to be sourced from oil, while 1.81 trillion naira is to be from non-oil. Now, funding from other sectors is estimated at 3.7 trillion naira.
The president indicated that the focus will be on the completion of ongoing projects instead of starting new ones. Well, Kirian, did you notice how the president used the occasion also to briefly highlight the economic successes recorded by his administration so far?
Of course, Mr. President noted a significant drop in inflation between January 2017 and August 2019, and the fact that Nigeria's external reserves went up from $23 billion in October 2016 to about $42 billion in September 2019. Most notably, the administration's resolve to sustain the anti-corruption agenda with strict adherence to the Treasury's single account, which has helped to curb corruption substantially in the country, particularly with the introduction of the integrated payroll and personnel information system.
Of course, you know, Mr. President also indicated that By the end of this month, any of the parastatals whose employees are not on the IPPIS would not be paid. But the president further indicated that the 2020 budget is designed to be one of fiscal consolidation to strengthen the macroeconomic environment, invest in critical infrastructure, human capital development, and enable institutions, especially in key job-creating sectors.
There is also provision for incentives for private sector investments in the 2020 appropriation bill, which is essential to complement the government's development plans, policies, and programs. It also includes enhancing the social investment programs to further deepen their impact on marginalized and most vulnerable Nigerians.
Now, the 2020 budget is expected to shore up the profile of the nation's economy on several fronts, as the budget focuses on key sectors and also reflects a return possibly to the January to December budget cycle. Now, the President of the Senate, Ahmed Lawan, gave assurance of the commitment of the National Assembly to the speedy passage of the budget before the close of December 2019.
And of course, the return to January-December budget cycle will be a good omen for this country because it has eluded the nation since 1919. Well, that's perhaps...
Since when?
Since 1999.
Exactly.
And that's perhaps why the Senate President called on heads of ministries, departments, and agencies to appear before the relevant committees on time for their budget defenses.
All right, but Nigerians certainly will be looking forward to a return to the budget cycle of January to December of each year, with the certainty that it provides for businesses and all of that in making their own projections and plans. But Nigerians obviously are entitled to also look forward to what further gains there would be in terms of what has been provided for in the appropriation, plus, of course, how the National Assembly members will work out the details of what the President already has indicated in the appropriation bill. A number of issues, of course, matters arising from the appropriation bill, and this we will take a look at in our conversation segment later on in the program. All right, and this, of course, some of the questions our guests will be responding to on today's edition of Good Morning Nigeria. My name is Nigerian. Many thanks for finding time to join us this morning. I'm Kingsley Osadolo. I joined my colleague Kieran to also welcome me to the program. We are live, as always, on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We have our usual complimentary segments in the course of the program, and these include business, newspaper review, and others. For now, let's join Chimobi Walter-Naji for the morning news. Good morning, Chimobi.
Hello, good morning, Kieran and Kingsley. It's good to be here this morning, and good morning, Nigeria. Now to the news. 1 week after the Senate resolved to review the Deep Offshore and Inland Basin Product Sharing Contract Act, it has begun the consideration of the bill that seeks to amend the Act. The bill has been passed for second reading.
The PSC Act will be reviewed to ensure that the share of federal government of Nigeria, the additional revenue, is adjusted to the extent that the PSC shall be economically beneficial to the federal government of Nigeria.
Go to court because the law was very, very clear. It is that $20 or 15 years from 1993. They signed up to that contract.
We're going to talk about the percentages. We're going to talk about penalty clause.
If this goes through, we'll not be looking for money to fund our budgets. A lot of money is here.
We need to make the suggested penalties a little stiffer so that it is not attractive for people to commit those things that we feel they must not.
And similarly, the 9th National Assembly has restated its resolve to, in partnership with the executive, take Nigeria to the next level of development through the swift consideration and passage of the 2020 appropriation bill, which President Muhammadu Buhari laid before a joint session Tuesday. The President of the Senate, Ahmed Lawan, and Speaker House of Representatives, Femi Gbajabiamila, assured commitment of the Parliament to fast-track the process without compromising legislative mandate as provided by the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
Distinguished joint session of the National Assembly, the 2020 budget proposals of the government of Nigeria.
The National Assembly has shown shown capacity, commitment, and willingness to treat legislative matters that impact on the lives of our citizens with this party and every sense of urgency. This was clearly demonstrated last week when we received, processed, and passed the Mr. President on the 2020-2022 million-term expenditure framework and fiscal strategy FSP.
What are our priorities? Building an economy that provides sufficient opportunity for our people to achieve the dreams they hold dear. Equipping our children with an education that prepares them for the challenges and opportunities of a rapidly changing world. Protecting the rights of our citizens and securing them for internal and external aggression. This is our commitment, and we will ensure that this commitment is reflected in the 2020 appropriation.
Now, away from the budget matters now, the African Investment Fund 2018 report deals on the distribution across sectors of the economy in Africa. Vice President Yemi Osinbajo says having good infrastructure in place is crucial to the growth of the economy and the nation, emphasizing that the Nigerian government is determined to invest in these and the people. This was at the 9th Nordic Africa Business Summit in Oslo, Norway.
Hope is that the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area, as well as initiatives within the different regional economic communities, will contribute to streamlining the rules, increasing the predictability, and consistent regulations to foster good governance.
Nigerians definitely feel that they could do a lot more. And I think that what is happening today is that a lot of those challenges are being turned into opportunity in significant ways. And when you look at it, I mean, if today, I mean, if you look at the sheer size of the country, it offers a huge market.
And back home in Nigeria, Information Culture Minister Lai Mohammed has restated the federal government's determination to provide the necessary incentives that will make the creative industry a key player in the national development growth. The minister stated this on the sidelines of the just concluded 25th Nigerian Economic Summit in Abuja.
And therefore, there is a need for this private-public dialogue. This will lead to policy formulation. From there, it will lead to legislation, and then all the parties will be quite clear. And I think we are going to work with the NESG and all the other, stakeholders.
Now, the federal government says it will partner global accounting bodies to improve probity in the management of public finance and expansion of the nation's revenue base. Permanent Secretary, General Services, Office of the Government of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Olusegun Adekule, made this known while receiving a delegation of the UK-based Association of Chartered Certified Accountants on behalf of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Boss Mustafa.
The management system than it was about 10 years ago. We'll share with you and we'll see areas that your body can intervene in the development of our systems in Nigeria.
What we're looking at is ways that you can change finance systems to get better results, more efficient and effective use of taxpayers' money. In Nigeria, the drive for public service reform would welcome such change as well.
Now, with Nigeria entering the second cycle membership of the Open Government Partnership, the Chief Executive Officer of the initiative, Sanjay Pradhan, says the country stands to benefit not only domestically but equally internationally if the second National Action Plan is implemented credibly.
Really populated and everyone would use it, you would actually feel, citizens would feel, look, all contracts are really open, right? So, and then you would have a global leadership position. You could run for the chair of the Open Government Partnership.
Still under the anti-corruption commitment, the federal government has approved the harmonized national anti-corruption strategy.
And those are the news highlights we have for now. Good Morning Nigeria continues with Kingsley and Kirian. Just after the break, I'm Chimobi Walter Naji. Guide is out, exclusively taking a look at the traditional television and new media. Are they comparable or complementary? Media industry players give perspective on the trends, progress, challenges, and the way forward. Find out on this compelling edition of TV Guide. Expository interviews with stars of the team within our space. Becky Madajero of NTA, Utibe Umore of ART, Nifemi Oguntai of TVC, and a host of others. TV Guide, your indispensable companion. Also feature Iya Medina.
I'm the CEO, managing director of Iya Medina Sister Restaurant. I choose to serve. Shut up your mouth. Let me finish.
A TV drama series on NTA. Let's get to meet the characters behind Iya Medina. This edition also presents exciting features on tourism, culture, entertainment, sports, health, and what's more. Grab a copy at the vendors near you or any NTA station nationwide. TV Guide, your indispensable companion.
Introducing new Always Cotton Soft. Its unique top sheet is a soft cotton and gentle to your skin, offering you comfortable protection as you go about your day. New Always Cotton Soft, available in long and extra long for 250 naira only.
Their ancestors were taken away as slaves. Now they return as kings and queens on a pilgrimage back to the motherland. The third door of return ceremony, Diaspora Festival, Badagry, Lagos, Nigeria, takes place in Badagry from the 15th to the 20th of October 2019. For details of participating in sponsorship, contact the following. Website adore.ng. The African Door of Return Experience. Don't miss it. Brought to you by the African Door of Return Experience Initiative in collaboration with the Nigerians in Diaspora Commission and the African Renaissance Foundation. Chief host, Lagos State Government.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Please, did you hear that?
Of course I did. That is village Elmaster tune.
So, Auntie Amebo not gossiping then?
Village Elmaster is celebrating 50 years.
50? Already?
You mean people have been watching Village Elmaster since 1968?
How time flies. I have retired, but not tired.
And 50 years now. So because of that, we won't get a big party.
New date, now 28th to 29th October 2019.
And me, I'm a body invite you now. And my belly just is sweet. Because I don't say all those people they drink my party. Then go come drink the tombo again. And me, radio Jamebo, they call you now. But you not forget it.
Let's turn to business now. The gains of micro, small and medium enterprises segment are huge, despite the fact that capital required for startup is minimal. Also, closure of Nigeria's land borders is taking a toll on rice exporting countries. Details with Kolo Mohammed on Business News.
Good morning. Welcome to Business News. A recent report indicates that the closure of Nigeria's land borders aimed at curbing smuggling activity, especially of rice, has taken a toll on rice exporting countries. According to the report, the commodity dipped by about 46% in 1 month in both Thailand and India. Businesses in Benin Republic, a nation of about 11 million people, about 5% of Nigeria's population, will import rice from Thailand and India solely not to consume, but to re-export to Nigeria.
When you close borders, and that has happened many times before, you find that the areas where they cry most in the other side, always, whether Cotonou border, whether Niger border, whether Chad border or Cameroon border, always the ones that cry most. Why is that? It means Nigeria is the one that is being somehow shortchanged.
Comptroller General of Nigeria Customs, Hamid Ali, says border closure by the federal government of Nigeria is to strengthen the nation's security and protect its economic interests. And the gains of viable micro, small and medium enterprise sector is huge, even though the capital needed for startup is minimal. And this is the major driver of major economies in the world.
There are many people who can change their lives with just 50,000 naira. 50,000 naira on small or micro can change the life of a Nigerian forever. Can start looking after himself, looking after his family, and looking after his other extended members of the family.
President Muhammadu Buhari has presented a 10.33 trillion naira 2020 national budget. The president presented the budget to a joint session of the National Assembly yesterday, Tuesday, the 8th of October 2019. Time now to let us see closing figures on the floor of the Nigerian stock market for Tuesday. Business at this time. Good Morning Nigeria continues right after now. See you again soon.
Thank you, Kola Mohammed, for the business package. Next for us, we'll take a look at the front pages of the papers we have this morning.
And Bayo Altayabi is here for today's newspaper review. Bayo, good morning and welcome to the program.
Thank you, Kirian. Good morning. Good morning, Kingsley. Good morning, Nigeria.
Good to see you.
Yeah. All right, let's begin with the New Telegraph, Kingsley. I have New Telegraph newspaper here, and above the nameplates of New Telegraph, fuel supply figure, NNPC malls end to secrecy. With a rider, state oil firm, Afremix Bank plan infrastructure financial deal. And just below the nameplate, we have some other stories. Sex scandal, Unilag suspends another lecturer. That's on page 8. Taraba killing, panel indicts army, police officers. It's on page 10. Then bad rules, Aba women protest, give Ibazu ultimatum. That's on page 9. Gunmen in military camouflage kidnapped 9 people in Abuja. It's on page 8. Now, the lead story, New Telegraph this morning, Buhari blames budget failure on poor revenue.
All right, let's take a look at the Punch newspaper. The Punch has, of course, lead stories on the appropriation bill that was presented by the president yesterday to the joint session of the National Assembly. National Assembly sets November 28 target for budget passage. With a rider, federal government proposes 10.33 trillion naira as estimates, 2.45 trillion naira to service debts. Details, of course, you'll find inside at pages 2 and 27. And then an earpiece there shows the allocations in tabular form. Recurrent expenditure 4.88, capital projects 2.14. And the details, of course, are also provided. Now, above the nameplate, you have the following headlines. Federal government may revoke Abuja, Ikeja, and 6 discos licenses. That's on page 30. Taraba killings panel wants captain, ASP, and soldiers punished. That's page 9. P&ID, petitioner offers to testify against ex-CJN Begore. That's page 7. And then beside the 2 photographs there on the front page showing the president
at the joint session of the National Assembly yesterday, you have the following headlines. Kogi, INEC to deploy 16,139 ad hoc staff. Senate receives Senator Abo's alleged assault probes report. That's page 7. Government abduct civil defense officer and 8 others demand 10 million naira. Sexual harassment. Unilag suspends another lecturer. Details can be found on pages 4 and 5.
Well, talking about sexual harassment, Unilag has suspended another lecturer, but in the University of Ghana, Legon, the lecturer in the eye of the sex scandal documentary says he's going to sue the British Broadcasting Corporation for damaging his reputation. The challenge will be if he has any reputation to defend when the facts are laid before the court. Meanwhile, yesterday, we saw the benefit of consultation, collaboration, and cooperation, which led to a convivial laying of the budget before the National Assembly. There were no jeers, there were no cheers, there were no booings, and there was no need to remind anybody that the world is watching us. President Muhammad Buhari presented a budget estimate of 10.3 trillion for the 2020. This is about 1.4 trillion higher than what was presented in 2019. The kernel of the budget is that it is expected to be revenue-driven. About 8.155 trillion is part of the revenue to be expected, and the breakdown shows that oil is to contribute 2.64 trillion, while non-oil will provide 1.81 trillion. Others will provide 3.4 trillion. Therefore, the budget is gradually consolidating the departure from an economy that is critically oil dependent. The intention, the president explained, is for fiscal consolidation to strengthen the microeconomic environment. It is also to ensure that we invest in critical infrastructure, in human development capital, as well as institutions to make sure that they are functioning. It was all based on the 2020 to 2023 medium-term expenditure frame. Oil price benchmark was put at $57 per barrel. Daily oil output is supposed to be about 2.18 million barrels per day. Exchange rate of naira to dollars is about 305 naira, while the enhanced growth expected within the period is 2.93%. Non-oil output through the acceleration of economic diversification and is the kernel of it, and inflation is expected to be slightly above the single digit. The target has been single digit inflation to ensure that money value is critically enhanced. The components, however, show that the recurrent expenditure was about 4.88 trillion, capital was 2.14 trillion, while statutory transfers, which comprise of allocation to the National Assembly, 125 billion, Judiciary, 110 billion, Northeast Development Fund, 37.83 billion, Basic Healthcare Fund, 44 billion, and Universal Basic Education had 101.79 billion. NNDC also had 80.888 billion. The atmosphere was very friendly. The Senate President assured that work on the appropriation will be accelerated. He even gave deadlines, and he said that budget defense will be completed in October, legislation will be completed in November, and the passage definitely by December. This, he called for all to work together to ensure that the nation can return to the January to December budget cycle. Speaker of the House of Representatives also lent a strong voice. He said the approach of the House of Representatives will be to reflect national values of integrity, of accountability, and the interests of the Nigerian people. He said our democracy is no longer an asset, in the sense that if you look back, we have had 29 years of military rule. If you put it together, we have now had democratic rule for a period of 30 years and 3 months. So that shows that our democracy has evolved from its nascent status, which should now begin to consolidate.
Well, it depends on what you consider, because the military interregnum, had a way of affecting national development because of the different administrative systems, by the two different governments. So that interregnum altered, what have continued, from the Second Republic, in the early 80s. But if there was no interregnum by now, well, if you say
59 years of democracy.
Exactly.
But the fact still remains that we should not continue to blame the military for our ailments. Why? Among those who were able to vote during the last election are people who were born 20 years ago. So they don't know anything about the military rule. So all they know is democracy. So we should be able to consolidate our democracy, reduce the friction of unnecessary arguments that retard our development.
Yeah, other stories. Yeah, this issue of kidnapping, which I read out in the New Telegraph. I mean, if that is true, what do you think about it? Gunmen in military camouflage kidnapped 9 people in Abuja.
Yes, the kidnapping story is worrying. In fact, there are 2 of them. Gunmen are reported to have kidnapped 2 policemen in Rivers State. That is in Port Harcourt. The police public relations officer Nnamdi Omoni says he's following up and he will confirm the details later. And pay a community in the outskirts of FCT, particularly around Kuje. That is where we have 4 personnel of the Nigerian Security and Civil Defense Corps that were kidnapped. Another 12-year-old was also a victim. And these people were kidnapped by persons who camouflaged their operation by wearing military camouflage, and they led people into the bush. This is raising concern because of recent, apart from one chance instances, you now have kidnapping becoming coming up on the increase. There was one at Asokoro just last month.
Coming into the town, I mean, that's
the audacity of the robbers now is very, very devious. And one of their strategies of recent that has come to the fore is that sometimes they come to your residence in SUV cars, all shaded, and they come and knock at your door and ask you to come out. Some residents have been able to spot this and they refuse to come out. When you come out, they bundle you into their car and they take you away.
It's unfortunate, but some of those stuff happens.
Yes. Let's go to the editorial for this morning. By no to jungle justice. You just mentioned the one chance, instances that we've had. Now, the recent story of the burning of death of 3 suspected robbers in Abuja has recalled penchant for ordinary citizens to take the laws into their hands by handing out their own brand of crude justice to those suspected to have committed offenses, mostly theft. Now, victims of jungle justice are mostly persons accused of theft, but there are other offenses like witchcraft, murder, the allegation of missing manhood, and cases of motor accident. This editorial is taken from the Leadership newspaper.
Yes, quickly, draw attention to this human interest story. There's been some appointment by Governor Muhammadu Badaru of Jigawa State. He has appointed 13 commissioners and 15 special advisors. However, the latest announcement is that the governor has appointed special assistants to each of his 3 wives. He also appointed 51 special assistants, including one for street lights and population control.
Okay.
Well, I mean, that story was on the social media, and I was just wondering, there's no surprise. Because there is no governor who doesn't have an essay attached to the wife. So if the governor has 1 wife, you have 1 essay. If the governor has 4 wives, you have 4 essays. It's not, and this one is 3 now. So he hasn't gone to the 4th level yet.
The concern is that in recent, we are talking about scarce resources, and we are having 51 special advisors, 13 commissioners, and other special assistants. The paraphernalia of government and the resources that is going into it. What is left for development?
That has been the system over the years. Even in the previous administrations, we've had that going on. But it does seem that the governors may have the what will I call it right now, or or privilege of doing that, without being checked, because these ladies are not officials of government. They are not doing any official function for government. But if you are going to have an essay, for instance, that should not even be public. That essay should not actually be paid from the public purse. There's nothing wrong in you hiring a private person, to do essay for you. But it has become trendy, in government circles.
Returning to jungle justice now. Of course, the kernel of the editorial is the three persons, the one chance attempt in Duse that the angry mob in Duse burnt up. Now, the editorial is happening on the negativity of jungle justice. And we all cannot but less agree with it that every accused person is presumed innocent until proven guilty by a court of law. When you resort to jungle justice, there are two complete implications. First of all, information from the accused persons, which could help prevent future occurrences, is denied. Secondly, some of the persons targeted could be innocent, and therefore an innocent person could have been killed. However, there's also an aspect of that which one has to be very careful about, in the sense that members of the public tend to say that when the criminals are allegedly taken to law enforcement agent, they are not brought to book, taken to court. You find them sometimes released. There are instances where people have reported persons for one misdemeanor or the other, and the person has come back home to meet the person who reported, okay, I am here, I am back. And it has become a problem. And so the confidence in law enforcement is reducing, but that is no justification for people to take laws into their own hands. We all remember what happened in October 2012. It was the R4, the undergraduates that were killed by that kind of mob action. Many of them, all of them were, in fact, innocent of what they claimed.
But so, I think the last incident in Abuja actually what attracted the people's attention, from what we had, was the fact that those who were killed actually pushed a lady out of the car, out of a moving car, but the lady was screaming, so they pushed her out, and the vehicle following them, tried to maneuver and block them from leaving. So people now gathered. So in fact, perhaps they have seen some evidence that something actually happened, why they pushed the lady out of the car, and he said it's not justifiable, really. They would have maybe held them and handed them over to the police.
Nevertheless, we have lost something. Vital information could have been extracted from them about their operation and their other cohorts who are engaged in such a thing.
Okay, Bayo, thank you very much for being with you and for being with us also.
Thank you.
We see you again tomorrow. All right, it's Good Morning Nigeria, the network service of the NTA. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll be discussing the matters arising from the appropriation bill tabled yesterday before the joint session of the National Assembly.
Is 40. Come, let's celebrate 40 years of impressive TV broadcasting at the grassroots. On Thursday, 17th October 2019, there'll be a lecture titled Lens and Sound Television, a tool for social reorientation and good governance. Guest lecturer, Professor Oluyemisi Oluremi Obiladi, Professor of Education and Women's Studies, Obafemi Awolowo University. Special guest of honor, His Excellency Prince Dr. Abiodun, Governor of Ogun State. Royal Father of the Day, His Royal Majesty Oba Adedotun Aremu Gbadebo, the Alake and Paramount Ruler of Egbaland. Chairman of the occasion, Chief Olatunde Anyela Abudu, Mayego of Egbaland. Chief Host, Malam Yakubu Ibn Mohammed, Director General, NTA. Other activities lined up for the occasion include an array of awards to distinguished entities held to walk on Saturday, 12th October 2019, while a novelty match comes up on Tuesday, 15th October 2019 at MKO Abiola Stadium. Come, celebrate 40 years of impressive television at the grassroots with us and take NTA Abeokuta to the next level.
They are there at the crack of dawn. They are there busy preparing while we rise for our day. They are there silently, guarding, waiting, listening, and watching. They are there ready in the sky above and the waters below, in the blistering heat of the day, in the dead of night, willing, indefatigable, determined in the defense of the sovereignty of our country. They are our first line of defense and our last. They who have paid the ultimate price in defending us. They are fathers and uncles. They are mothers and sisters and girlfriends and boyfriends. They are brothers and cousins and best friends and neighbors. They are classmates, colleagues, and citizens of this nation. They are our defenders and deserve our respect, our prayers, our thoughts. Nigeria, please support our armed forces.
The NTA ETV Annual Expo is here again. This time, it's the 13th edition with the theme Promoting Unity and Innovations in Youths as Agents of Change through Science and Art. It's promised to be captivating as youths across the nation showcase their unique skills and innovations in science and arts, make new friends, and showcase their rich cultural heritage. Join us at the NTA Headquarters Arena, Area 11, Abuja, from Sunday 20th October to Thursday 24th October 2019. For more information, participation, and sponsorship, please call these numbers. NTA ETV, promoting learning.
What we are really cultivating here is a better future for all Nigerian women, and it's not always easy. Panadol Extra relieves headache, backache, joint pain, toothache, and menstrual pain. The pain is worth it.
And in case you just joined us, this is Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. So thank you for staying with us up to this moment. Today we are discussing the 2020 Appropriation Bill, which was presented to a joint session of the National Assembly yesterday by President Muhammadu Buhari. Now here is a report by State House correspondent Adamu Sambo.
The 9th National Assembly and the executive arm of the Buhari presidency are now very much on the same page, is not in doubt. And as the president lays the 2020 appropriation bill for consideration, the ambience in the hallowed chambers clearly indicates unity of purpose as well as avowed commitment by all to accelerate the pace of socio-economic development and enhance the welfare of Nigerians, political differences notwithstanding. The 10.33 trillion naira budget proposal presented by the Nigerian leader is made up of 2.14 trillion naira capital expenditure, 4.88 trillion naira for recurrent debt service obligation of 2.45 trillion naira, 556.7 billion naira statutory transfers, as well as sinking fund of 296 billion naira.
The main emphasis will be completion of as many ongoing projects as possible, rather than commencing new ones. MDAs have not been allowed to admit new projects into their capital budget for 2020, unless adequate provision has been made for the completion of all ongoing projects.
The budget is predicated on a conservative oil price benchmark of $57 per barrel, oil production of 2.18 million barrels per day, an exchange rate of 305 naira to a dollar, real GDP growth of 2.93%, while inflation is expected to remain slightly above single digits.
Accompanying the 2020 budget proposal is a finance bill for your kind consideration and passage into law. The draft finance bill proposes an increased VAT rate from 5 to 7.5%. The additional revenues will be used to fund health, education, and infrastructure programs. As the states and local governments are allocated 85% of all VAT revenues, we expect to see greater quality and efficiency in their spending.
As the government proposes the 2020 budget is expected to be financed by 8.15 trillion naira oil, non-oil, and other revenues, while the deficit of 2.18 trillion naira will be funded through new foreign and domestic borrowings.
Our government remains committed to ensuring the equitable sharing of economic prosperity. Our focus on inclusive growth and shared prosperity underscores our keen interest in catering for the poor and most vulnerable. Accordingly, we are revamping and improving the implementation of the National Social Investment Program through the newly created Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management, and Social Development.
With ministries of works and housing, power, and transportation getting the lion's share of capital allocation, the budget has, amongst other priorities, strengthening macroeconomic environment, enhancing critical infrastructure, accelerating the pace of socio-economic recovery, as well as achieving the objectives of massive job creation and poverty reduction.
We need to quickly review the fiscal terms for deep offshore oil fields to reflect the current realities and for more revenue to accrue to the government. We estimate that this effort can generate at least 500 billion United States dollars additional revenue for the federal government in 2020 and over $1 billion from 2021. We remain committed to prudently planning for our future economic prosperity.
While commending the lawmakers for their renewed sense of cooperation, understanding, and support with the executive arm in the task of taking Nigeria to the next level, the president also appreciated Nigerians for renewing his administration's mandate to continue with the Change Nigeria enterprise, which he promised will be delivered.
I thank you most sincerely for your patriotic resolve to collaborate with the executive in the short and long term.
More details on the 2020 budget will be provided by the Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Zainab Shamsuna Ahmed, in the coming days.
Thank you very much, Adamu Sambo, for that elaborate backgrounder, of course, providing highlights of the presentation of the appropriation bill yesterday by President Muhammadu Buhari at the National Assembly. Now, we have guests with us here in the studios as well as at our network centers. They are all guests that we normally would have when we are analyzing economic and financial matters. First, let's welcome Professor Mike Obadan. Professor Mike Obadan, of course, Professor of Economics and also a member of the Monetary Policy Committee of the Central Bank of Nigeria. Prof, pleasure to have you again on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Good Morning Nigeria.
Also here with us in the studios is Niyi Akinsiju, an economic and investment analyst. Niyi, pleasure to have you with us.
My pleasure always. Thank you so much.
All right.
And also joining our conversation this morning from our Lagos studio is Shaibu Idris. Shaibu Idris is a financial analyst. Good morning and welcome to the program.
Good morning, fellow discussant. Good morning and good morning, Nigerians.
From our Port Harcourt studio, let's welcome Professor Garba Ibrahim Sheikha, a professor of economics at Bayero University, Kano. Welcome to the show.
Morning, Nigeria.
All right, gentlemen, let's begin the conversation. I mean, we know what the numbers are in terms of the highlights, but overall, what's your take on the 2020 budget that the National Assembly now has before it to consider? Professor Michael Bado.
Thank you very much, Kingsley. Well, I think the budget is a good one, taking cognizance of the current economic circumstances. As the President rightly observed, the current situation in the global economy and even in Nigeria is rather challenging. And there are many issues which need to be addressed through public spending. And the budget is tailored towards addressing a good number of the issues that continue to pervade the economy. I think overall the budget is realistic, although expansionary. Realistic in many respects. For example, with respect to the macroeconomic parameters and assumptions, I think there is a lot of realism there. The capital budget, for me, is also realistic, although there's a reduction in the budget provision for 2020 compared to 2019 and even earlier. And if we look at the rate of implementation, the executive capacity to implement budget and all that, then we will find it that the capital budget provision is very realistic.
Okay, so from what he has said there, the budget is tailored towards addressing some of the issues that tend to draw back the pace of economic development. Now, to Ani Akinju, let's have your own thoughts on this budget of continuity as presented by the president yesterday.
Yeah, I'll start off from the budget of continuity. The continuity is contextualized in the economic recovery and plan. That plan will be retired with the budget 2020. And I think so far, if we do an evaluation of the performance of the ERGP itself, which is the blueprint from which the last three budgets, inclusive this one, had been taken, one would say that to a large extent it had achieved some of the milestones, as it were, in terms of taking us out of recession, in terms of putting us on a growth trajectory, and of course, in terms of building a foundation, laying a foundation for further and enhanced growth. And I think that is what Budget 2020 is proposed to achieve. Generally, I am impressed with the philosophical undercurrent, and I always say that because figures are just figures, except they have a philosophy to drive it, to determine the objectives and the milestones to be achieved. And in this case, we are talking of inclusive growth, very important. In the last so many years, especially between 2002 and 2014, we recorded 2013, we recorded impressive growth. But were those growth inclusive? We had as high as 8-point-something GDP, 8.70% in our GDP in 2010. Well, it was that same year that we started recording huge figures in our unemployment figures, for instance. And in fact, 2 years after, we reached perhaps the highest threshold in the figures of Nigerian poor, when 112 million Nigerians were recorded to be living under $1 a day in 2012. So inclusive growth is important. And I think the president made capital out of this, linking his presentation at the economic summit, Nigerian Economic Summit, to the fact that there's a serious case of inequity and inequality, in Nigeria. So much that you only have just about 5 states, inclusive of the FCT, that can be said to be the custodian of Nigeria's wealth, or that can be said to have cornered Nigeria's wealth. So you are talking of the alienation of 31 states. So you can only multiply the population in those states, to understand the context, of inclusiveness, and which is very important. And he also talked about sustainability. Right? Sustainability is important, so that we don't go from this boom and bust circle. We grow this year. In other months after our growth, we are crashing. So we cannot even determine the course or direction we want to move. And he also talked about creating massive jobs. Jobs is a major challenge for Nigeria. In terms of unemployment figures, in terms of underemployment figures, we are talking close of more than 40%. So it's a major challenge, and it needs to be addressed. Whatever we are doing in terms of policy deployment, it should actually be targeted at creating more jobs, and taking out people out of poverty. Because the more jobs you create, the more people will be taken out of poverty. So I think on the balance, the budget is quite balanced and it's quite focused. It cannot, and we need to say this, put this caveat, the budget cannot attend to every matter that confronts us at a time.
Well, of course, this is the federal budget, and not the budget of the nation, as it were. So you have the other tiers of government with their own budgets. Obviously, we'll be seeing in the weeks to come, the various states tabling their own budgets before their respective houses of assembly. Let's go over to our Lagos Network studio. Shwaibu Idris, let's have your comments initially on the appropriation bill tabled yesterday.
I will add on a little bit to what the respected colleagues in the Lagos studio have said. I think in general the philosophy behind the budget is excellent. The thought process is good. Budget of consolidation and continuity. If you look at the objectives ranging from expanding the economy, creation of jobs, the social infrastructure or social investment programs, these are excellent ideas. However, in a typical document like the one presented yesterday by Mr. President, generally you're expected to see about 5 or 6 subsections. Number one is a trajectory of what happens in the past, an assessment of the last year's budget, which is 2019, which is the current year. How did we perform? Mr. President did give figures of the performance, recurrent expenditure. We achieved close to about 95% of spending. Meanwhile, capital expenditure was less than 30%. Yet, we had a deficit funding of close to about 70%. Kingsley, if you ask me, as an individual, why will somebody borrow to fund consumption? This is an abnormality. And I think the document should have dwelt a little more on why should we be having such a situation. Number two, the current year's budget. If you remember, early part of this year, when we had this discourse, I did, challenge Pastor Ben Akabuzi, the Director of Budget, on the assumptions on crude oil price and the production. Again, exactly what I thought was likely going to happen was what has happened this year. We are not able to achieve 2.2 million barrels per day, and yet the government is still forecasting that we will achieve 2.18 million barrels a day. Why are we doing this? Are these assumptions just figures being bandied? I think as economics and as financial analysts, we must be careful when we look at assumptions. Number three, Kingsley, if you permit me, is the issue of spending on the capital expenditure. We all thought that Mr. President, when he came in, he said he will run a lean government, a lean budget, and therefore the current expenditure will be going down, capital expenditure will be going up. What have we witnessed now? Capital expenditure has gone down, the current expenditure is going up. Mr. President has increased the number of ministries, he has increased the number of ministers. Is that where we are heading to? And if you look at, the taxation aspect, Mr. President is proposing to increase value-added tax. Do we really actually have a VAT system in Nigeria? We are using sales tax as a value-added tax. And the number of items so excluded will further probably exacerbate the lack of revenue in the system that will be accruing to government. Mr. President didn't explain to us what was the debt level when he came into power and what is the current debt situation. As of today, Kingsley, we have close to about 26 billion US dollars in foreign debt, while local or domestic debt is in the region of 56 billion US dollars. If you ask me, we have achieved, a reserve accretion of about 15 to 20 billion from somewhere around $23 billion in 2015 to where we are today, 42 or $44 billion. Is that good enough? given the extent of the debt we have, incurred. I think there are a number of areas that we probably need to be careful. I'm not so comfortable with some of the assumptions because the assumptions are not hinged on solid ground. You are talking about restructure of your oil industry without the petroleum industry bill being passed. I mean, so how do you achieve that? I think there are a lot of explanation that either the finance minister or the director general of the budget office need to give to the nation and indeed to us economics.
Well, we appreciate that opening comment, and as the president said yesterday, that as we make progress, that the Minister of Budget and Planning will be doing a breakdown of the budget. Perhaps some of the things we wanted explained could come in there. Now, let's go to Professor Garba Ibrahim Sheka, who is in our Port Harcourt studio. So let's share your own opinion on the 2020 budget, which of course is a critical document of development. What's your take on what you had yesterday?
Well, thank you very much. Well, actually, 2020 budget is like any other budget, like my colleagues in the studio have already stated. It contains areas that actually are good, and of course, there are certain areas that most of us are very skeptical about it. The good stories about economic growth, which moved from 0.82 in 2017 to about 2.02% this time around, is encouraging. But still the economy, the GDP is growing very slowly. And then, of course, again, the other good story is that inflation has dropped from around 18% to just around 11%. And there is a promise by the government to push it closer to a single digit. And another good thing is the issue of this external reserve. Though, like my colleague has rightly pointed out, external reserve has just gone up by from just 23 billion to about 42 billion. These are all good things, but certainly we need to accelerate these figures. And of course, the inflow of the foreign capital in the economy is also a little bit slow, from just 12 billion to 14 billion. I am particularly skeptical about the persistent deficit budget that this government has been actually presenting since inception. Like my colleague in Lagos has rightly pointed out, we are now indebted to the tune of over $81 billion. And this year budget is still a deficit budget again, in the sense that we can only realize 8.15 trillion, and we propose a budget of 10.33 trillions. So certainly, if you look at the figures presented, like the recurrent expenditure 4.88 trillions, just 2.14 trillion for capital expenditure. In this case, the recurrent expenditure is twice larger than the capital expenditure, and most serious is the debt service. We spent 2.45 billion, which is trillion, which is much more than capital expenditure. And if we continue accumulating, producing a deficit budget that will further, aggravate the external debt, certainly in the next coming years, we'll be paying trillions more in servicing this debt. So actually, I'm so skeptical about that. And in trying to give priority areas, Mr. President mentioned a number of areas: fiscal consolidation, investment in human capital, as well as encouraging private sector investment. But actually, I thought Mr. President will clearly talk about security issues as one of the critical priorities in this government, because down in the north we are devastated by banditry, kidnappings, and so on and so forth, which seriously retard economic growth. So actually, I am a bit skeptical about the budget, especially with regards to also the projections made by the by the president about the issue of revenue coming from oil and revenue coming from other sectors. He has already presented a lot of problems that led to the failure of the last budget, especially particularly with regards to the issue of fall in oil revenue, as well as the issue of delay. Though this year we had heard about the promise by the National Assembly that they will consider the budget immediately, but certainly there are a lot of things to be afraid of in this year's budget.
Right. Professor Sheka, thank you very much there for your opening comments. Of course, we will return to you in the course of the conversation. Let's come back to our Abuja studios. Professor Michael Badan and Deya Kinsi. I mean, we can quarrel, as it were, with the assumptions with regard to the benchmark price for crude oil, the quantum of oil to be produced. Somehow it's been hit or miss, over the years, not just with this administration. But one of the issues that emerged from the president's statement yesterday is an acknowledgement that there is a revenue challenge. Yeah. And he did talk about the fact that, look, appropriate agencies who are supposed to be revenue collectors or revenue drivers would face severe consequences if they didn't meet their set targets. Twice he said that in his speech. But there are also proposals, to shock, as it were, the revenue challenges that the country is faced with. How do we then reconcile the fact that, look, we have this revenue challenge, and yet, as you said, Prof, we have a budget that's still expansionary and forward-looking and still hoping to be inclusive and solving our developmental challenges?
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Kingsley. The revenue challenge for government is very real and is being a major problem for budget implementation. And the president gave some statistics yesterday that as at the first half of this year, the revenue realized, I think, about 58%, of the projected. And the shortfall came from both the oil and the non-oil sectors, which means that, the country is not mobilizing enough revenue in spite of the efforts. And that happened even when crude oil prices were quite reasonable, averaging $65 to $67 per barrel. But you see, the issue of production, then negated the positive developments in crude oil prices. And so oil, revenue, dipped, could not live to the expectations. Non-oil revenue also did not live to expectations. And VAT that we're even talking about now, as the president acknowledged, did not live up to expectations. Which means then that greater efforts are really required, particularly in the area of non-oil revenue mobilization. But it will seem that the efforts so far have not been yielding the desired, results. And that brings me to the question of the provision for revenue, non-oil revenue in the 2020 budget. One of the astounding issues is that government desires to rely less heavily on oil revenue and more on non-oil revenue. Oil revenue is projected to, provide about 32.something% of aggregate revenue. Yes, it is very desirable and it will be very, very, comfortable if we can achieve quantum leap in non-oil revenue mobilization. But with the current state of affairs in the country, with the relatively low and fragile economic growth rate, the base for massive non-oil revenue mobilization is still very weak and fragile. So that projection itself, the realization is a bit doubtful. That at the end of the day, we are likely to see perhaps 70 or 60% of government revenue coming from the non-oil sector. So in that case, we still have to be, let's say prayerful, as it were, for now, that there will be positive developments in the global oil market. Positive developments, particularly in the area of price. I say prayerful because the projections for crude oil prices for next year are not really heart-warming. The futures oil price projections is in the mid-50s for next year. And if that materializes, it means that our budget expectations will not be realized. But we are hoping that developments in the global economy could be such that the oil price will still be above $60 per barrel. And if it's above $60 per barrel and we are able to maintain production at about maybe 1.9 million barrels per day, or 2 million barrels, but I don't see how that one can materialize because of the constraint from OPEC. OPEC is still maintaining, production limits with a view to shoring up the prices of crude oil in the market. And Nigeria's quota, I think I understand, is around 1.7 or thereabout. And so, the possibility, of getting more revenue, from either the oil sector and the non-oil sector is not so bright. But we are hoping that things could change and that more revenue will be obtained. The implication of any shortfalls in revenue projected will be further accumulation of debt, which will not be good desired for the country.
Well, he said we ought to be hopeful and as well as prayerful to see how things can turn on our side in terms of positivity required, to be able to raise the funds. As a matter of fact, gentlemen, when it comes to budgeting for a nation, you talk about projections that you have mentioned, and that we expect that there should be some other structures through which government can earn revenue. And that brings us to the issue which, of course, the Senate President deliberated on yesterday, during that presentation, and that has to do with what the President said. And I'm going to Akinci now. He said that he will be reforwarding to the National Assembly the Deep Offshore and Inland Basin Production Sharing Contract Amendment Bill, which was first sent to the National Assembly during the 8th National Assembly. But of course, that was not deliberated on by that assembly. Now he said he will forward it to the National Assembly. Now, what is the revenue base of that contract bill? Because from what we had in one of the reports, that if that is passed into law, that there is basically going to be an expanded revenue sources, from the oil sector. And I'm also going to add to this, what about the non-oil sector, which of course this administration has told Nigerians over the years that of course the government has done enough to see how non-oil sector can make appreciable, bring appreciable revenue to the cost of government.
Yeah, thank you. Taking it from the deep offshore and the river basin oil contracts, I think sometimes in 1991, Nigeria decided to change templates from what we call the joint venture partnership to production sharing contracts. And at that time, price of crude oil was very, very low. So the basis for signing that contract was to say we'll take a certain percentage when the price of crude oil is below $20 per barrel. And with the proviso that once the price is above $20 per barrel, we will have to review that law and increase the threshold of commission that will come to sovereign Nigeria. Unfortunately, we decided to marginalize ourselves. The proviso is clear: above $20, review. We have done between 2005 and 2013, we have done an average of $80. In fact, between 2011 and 2013, we were doing an average of $95 per barrel. These were times that we should have reviewed this law, because it means that we would have taken more commission more commission and more taxes from that contract. So if it's late, I mean, it's not late. It's also there'll be a proviso to also look at the backlog, and that's what I think be part of the issues that will be addressed in the amendments. Backlog of accruable commission that should have come to Nigeria, and that's why the president said we could, even in 2020 alone, raise as much as 500 million from that from the amendment to that contract. So I think it's good, and I am also bullish on the National Assembly amending that. And on the VAT, I think the president has a natural instinct to protect the poor. So whenever an issue comes that may likely impact Nigeria's poor, it goes out on a limb, to protect the interests of the poor. And yes, VAT is supposed to raise revenue, but to what extent can we also provide succor, protection for those that are vulnerable? Any addition of a kobo on the Nigerian poor is a burden. So what the president had done is to exclude principally all food items from the VAT, from this new proposed VAT amendments. All food items, bread, up to gari, and all that, so that the poor man is protected. Well, you can still VAT gari. You VAT it if you go and eat it in a restaurant in Sheraton, or a restaurant in somewhere. So the poor man is protected to that extent. And well, I as observed by one of the Lagos guests, yes, that is supposed to make money. And but I see this protectiveness as also important, because like the president said at the Economic Summit Group 2, that it's not enough to allow market forces to determine our pace of economic growth, that we should also do government intervention. I think it's part of this government intervention that the president said the threshold for vatable companies must be 25 million and above. By doing that, you are taking away mostly all the small scale entrepreneurs out of the VAT coverage area. So the idea generally is to reduce the burden on the poor. So if you are doing 25 million upward, it means from 0 to 25 million, any company within that coverage area is not qualified for VAT. So that essentially is the issue. Why I also look at the area of deficit financing, 3.7 trillion. I think that's the others. Of course, it's inclusive of loan. But I think more fundamental is the tax credit scheme that we are talking of up to 205 billion naira. The president said, in fact, some companies are already filing, their interest. So which means already we have a 205 billion addition, to revenue expectation, and of course reduction of Nigeria's holdings in our joint ventures. So I don't know the threshold, but most of our joint ventures partnership, Nigeria holds between 49 and 53 percentage. So I expect that 10-15% sell-off in those holdings will also accrue some funds to us. So the truth must be told, and I always say this: as of this moment, Nigeria is a poverty endemic jurisdiction, and we have issues with revenue generation. Our major capitalistic point is still our oil and gas, either we like it or not. We have missed the opportunity of reinvesting our income over the years. So we need to all build up, for the challenges ahead.
Well, Neil, that's an important issue that we have also raised, all within the context of the identified revenue challenge that the country faces. Shuaibu Idris, I'll still put this question to you. There are a number of items, if you like, in the revenue basket. Kirian asked the question a while ago as to the proposal to amend the offshore and inland basin production sharing contract acts, and what quantum of funds the president expects from that. 500 billion US dollars, I think he indicated. No, 500 million US dollars that was indicated. If there are areas, that will be useful. Throw into that VAT. You mentioned a while ago that there seems to be some conflation between the old sales tax and VAT. I'm not quite clear what the president indicated by saying that companies below whose turnover is below 25 million naira will be exempted from VAT. Is VAT now corporate income tax or what? I mean, why would it be exempted? It's the company that transacts business. It is on the basis of items that you pick that, of course, you pay VAT. Is it on the volume of business that you will now be paying VAT or what? That's not quite clear to me. And then the items that have also been excluded from VAT, virtually all food items, eggs, white and brown bread, yams, and so on and so forth. He already mentioned the fact that, okay, fine, if you go to an upscale restaurant to eat, you pay VAT. If you went to the supermarket to go and buy an egg and then you buy other toiletries and so on and so forth, at the register, is there going to be a selection of the items? So you keep egg aside, keep your egg aside. They will normally tally everything and then they'll just give you a VAT of 5% or now 7.5%. Do you foresee some implementation challenges with regard to VAT? That's one. And secondly, the revenue challenge that we face, are there indications that we might be on top of those challenges on account of what the president has stated in his appropriation bill presentation?
Kingsley, God bless you abundantly for that comment and indeed the question. I think number one, somehow we need to wake up from our slumber. The NESG, the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, yesterday, or before yesterday when the summit opened, did say clearly to Mr. President that time is running out for Nigeria and indeed for himself as President and Commander-in-Chief of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And what that means is we need some fundamental changes, a bit of a shock therapy. Nigeria is probably one of the countries that has the lowest VAT rate. Yes, value-added tax is supposed to be tax on production along the value chain. What we have in Nigeria is somewhat a sales tax, which is a bit inflationary. Now, unless otherwise, we have a paradigm shift and we are charging the value-added tax in the normal cost of production at each and every level of the value chain, we will not get an appropriate VAT system in Nigeria. Number two, for Mr. President to say what he wished to have and, recouching, excuse my choice of word, what he wished to have, or to use the word wish, is to say that companies that have 25 million naira turnover and above should be subjected to value-added tax. What will we be seeing in Nigeria? Fraud. Because I can have a company that has a turnover of 50 million, 100 million, and still report a 25 million. What have we succeeded? We are reducing the number of taxable companies and products because of this somewhat sentiment or emotion that we shouldn't charge the poor. Remember, in the budget, one of the things Mr. President alluded to, the reason why revenue targets were not met was what he called cost recovery in oil in the oil industry. What that means is basically, and to put it crudely, is subsidy. We are are still not coming out to remove the subsidy on petroleum products, how do we want to say we will achieve either a balanced budget or we will achieve a budget that will be funding, capital expenditure as much as we possibly can from our revenues as well as from debt servicing, from the debts that we will be getting? And ladies and gentlemen, imagine a budget of 10.3 trillion naira, and in that budget, only 2.1 trillion naira will be spent on capital expenditure. In a developing economy like Nigeria, this is a bit of an abnormality. And I think I have serious issues with some of our planners and some of those preparing this budget. They appear to be talking from the two sides of their mouths. One side you talk some nice issues, and the other part you tend to paint a picture that is, when the facts are there, to call a spade, and we are still hiding. Nigeria today has one of the lowest tax to GDP ratio. Should that be a thing to glorify us? Shouldn't we be concerned? And when you look at, the ERGP, the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan, which is expected to terminate by next year, you take a look at Vision 2020. We need to situate this budget in particular to say, where were we when we started the visioning process of Vision 2020? Where are we today? How much have we achieved? And what do we wish to? And why have we not achieved those that we have not achieved? Oil is a Western asset. United Arab Emirates has had oil. Today, they don't rely on oil. Where are the actions or policies Nigeria needs to espouse and implement so that we will have a zero oil economy in the near future? These are issues that we need to look at. Yes, Mr. President is proposing to send another bill to restructure the oil contract. That has been long overdue. And why are we just talking about this? Why didn't we think about this like Mr. Nia has said 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 7 years ago? Why today? I mean, Professor Obama has rightly said the oil market, the futures market is positing that next year oil prices should be around $50, $51, $52. Today, we are hinging our next year's budget at $57. What is the basis of this assumption? Like I said, any part of the year, we couldn't agree that we cannot produce 1.8 million, 2.2 million barrels. Our OPEC production quota is 1.7. Why are we budgeting as 2.1? We have issues.
Shabi Idris, thank you indeed. I think our guest in the studio, that he has actually raised the fundamental developmental issues that were ignored over the years. I'm not really just of those who are in power at the moment, because what they have inherited is very huge in terms of structure, in terms of economic approach, in terms of, as a matter of fact, policies in the first instance. So let's return to Professor Sheka. Professor Sheka, you have listened to Shaibu Idris and on this issue of new VAT implementation as Kingsley raised. How can that be implemented based on what the president said with respect to companies that have a total of about 25 million? And I ask this question because this budget proposal, according to the president, is expected to accelerate the pace of national economic development, bring about competitiveness and what have you. So give us an idea of what you think, in this connection.
In the first instance, I am really not in support of increasing VAT as a viable source of increased revenue to the government to finance the budget. Whether we like it or not, we know theoretically an increase in tax rate is always associated with negative multiplier effects of the economy, whether in the short run or in the long run. So increase in VAT may have both micro and macroeconomic effects. In the first instance, if VAT is imposed, or like it is now, 50% of it increased, certainly for those that are vulnerable, those that are above the 25 million naira something capital, but then if that is imposed, if their commodities price elastic, certainly, price inelastic, certainly the burden will be shifted directly on the consumers. So it is an indirect tax that the burden will be shifted on the consumers. So, well, if that is done, actually it will trigger inflation because certainly consumers will be paying higher prices. And of course, like we all agree, they are vulnerable, mostly common people. And those exclusions are not that adequate to take care of the common people. And then again, if VAT is actually increased, we'll certainly have a situation where we know it will affect our disposable income, and then there is going to be deficiency in demand, and certainly that will affect the growth of the industries, and many of them even fall off because of it. So, essentially speaking, it's not even a question of implementation. How can government look for more tax bases rather than this vulnerable kind of tax that will affect almost everybody? I am not in support of the increase in VAT because of the devastating effect it will have in the economy, and I know if care is not taken, it will even further widens the income inequality among the people within the country. So certainly speaking, I know there is certainly going to be a problem with regards to the implementation because whether it is done properly or not, it will certainly have a negative impact on the economy. Common people will be affected, and I don't anticipate any serious increase in the revenue from that because certainly in the near future, in the short run, government will make a lot of money really. But in the long run, when it has actually deflated the disposable income, there is certainly going to be an effect on the productive sector, and it will even affect the GDP growth that we are so happy to see, growing.
All right, but Professor Shekar and other guests, we would like to thank you for your comments in the meantime. Just to add, I don't think we're getting back into the VAT issue again, Kieran, that the federal government's own receipt from the VAT is actually 15%. So the proposed increase from 5 to 7.5% will be a boon to the subnational entities, namely the states and local governments. There are other matters, of course, to deal with when we return from this break.
An award that succeeded to pool a galaxy of stars from the north, south, to the west, central, Africa, and also those that are domiciled beyond the shores of Africa under one roof.
Don't you people sell imported materials here? As beautiful as the shop is.
Nancy, buying foreign goods does not help our economy. Neither does it boost local production. And the good thing is Nigerian-made products are high quality. And to make Nigeria great again, that is why I only sell made in Nigeria products. Because change begins with me.
I'm convinced. Change begins with me too. Change begins with me.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency, conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Well, you're welcome back to the program. Let's turn to Mike Obadan, who's a professor of economics. We've listened to Shaibu Idris, Cheka, and of course Akinsi with us in the studio. Now that we are almost at the closing aspect of this conversation, what is it in this budget that you feel should be revisited as the National Assembly deliberates on the budget, and what are you expecting from the National Assembly with respect to the process, because now it has just started? Hopefully Nigerians are looking forward to having January to December budget cycle. So what is in this budget that you think should be retouched as the process of deliberation by National Assembly commences?
Well, thank you very much, Kirian. You've made one point concerning the commitment of the National Assembly to normalizing the budget cycle to January to December, as to compared to the aberration we had in the past of implementing a budget over 18 months. That has been the case. And I think that would be a major expectation from me, from the National Assembly, that they should work assiduously. Yes, look at details of the budget, but ensure that by December, middle of December, or latest third week of December, the president, assents to the budget. And then we'll be talking about implementation from January 1, 2020. That one will provide scope for proper implementation of the budget over a 12-month period. And you saw the presentation of the president yesterday, that the capital budget for 2019 only attracted releases in the third quarter of this year, and third quarter release of about 294 billion naira, out of a capital budget of 3.18 trillion for 2019. And the president is hopeful that before the end of the year, 600 billion naira will be released, as capital budget. So making a total release for the year less than 1 trillion, which means that for this year, the rate of capital budget implementation is going to be much lower than expected and projected. So, but if the budget is enacted before the end of the year and capital budget implementation begins effectively latest February 1, for instance, you see, and assuming that funds flow will be regular, then we'll have a reasonable proportion of the budget to be implemented. So I want to enjoin the National Assembly to stick to their commitment of getting the budget passed before the end of the year and then regularizing the calendar. Well, in terms of what the National Assembly should touch, it's perhaps in the area of the cost of governance reflected by the non-debt recurrent expenditure. That is particularly the personnel costs. We are in a fix there now because the federal government has to implement the minimum wage. And perhaps because of that, the personnel budget has, increased significantly. So I would suggest that the National Assembly should look critically at the non-debt component of the budget to see areas of possible duplication, areas of possible wastages, that can be eliminated from the budget. And already, the president, in the context of the fiscal reforms, has mentioned that there will be certain frameworks that will be put in place to manage personnel costs more effectively, such that every staff of the federal government must be captured under the IPPIS system. Now that anybody who is not captured will not receive salary. And again, parastatals, ministries, departments, and agencies of government are being told to put a halt to this question of proliferating zonal offices, liaison offices, state offices, and so on and so forth. So there are moves in that area. But then the National Assembly can take a much deeper look into the structure of the recurring expenditure by government, and then see areas that can be reduced so that the cost of governance can go down. Well, in the area of debt servicing, I'm not so sure that there is much that can be done there, because we are owing, and we are supposed to be servicing our debt as and when due. And particularly for foreign debts, if you don't service and we are accumulating arrears, such arrears tend to be capitalized and then attract more interest. So they will take a look at that area and see what can be done if it's feasible. But I think the important thing will be for us to ensure we step up non-oil revenue mobilization, such that there will be no need to make recourse to frequent borrowing and then accumulating the debt profile and so on.
Well, Professor Obadan, thank you very much. The issue of debt is one we've taken on this program, on Good Morning Nigeria. We had the ministers of finance in the past. The argument would be our debt to GDP ratio was very comfortable, and that we had a buffer that there was nothing to worry about. But we are seeing within a few years, the debt issue is becoming something that is significant. Anybody who was in this country from the mid-80s up until just less than 10 years ago, when we got debt relief, will know how consequential it is to be a debtor nation. We constrained our policy space, made things very challenging for us. We kept paying interest, not even the principal. I think some persons would argue that it is time to begin to apply the brakes for purposes that are quite specific. One point that Shuaibu Idris raised is year 2020. You also touched on that briefly, and the president mentioned it, but some persons would argue that perhaps we didn't get enough depth as to what will happen. 2020 is a watershed year for us in terms of economic planning. ARGP winds down. In 2020 there was Vision 2020 as well. The president has given a hint that there will be a successor plan to ARGP, and perhaps a national development plan, this time of much longer gestation. But where are we coming from to be able to ensure that at the end of 2020 we can measure ourselves and say this is where we are now in terms of human development, in terms of infrastructural growth, and all of that? This is part of the philosophical underpinning that you also referenced earlier.
I think we missed much on the direction of the Vision 2020 itself. Between 2013 and 2016, we lost focus. The only extract from the Vision 2020 that we could reference may be our financial stability system as one of the pillars of Vision 2020, either in terms of stability or in terms of the use of technology, and I think we've been able to achieve that. But more or less, I want to look at ARGP. The ARGP is a product of circumstances. We had a crisis. We had gone into a recession, and we needed to find a path out of recession. ARGP was presented as the blueprint. Has it done what it was purposed to achieve? I think to a large extent. 2017 January, inflation was a high 18.76%. August 2019, it had gone to 11.02%. To that extent, it's good. October 2016, foreign reserve, 23 billion. August 2019, foreign reserve, 42. In fact, as at August, it was $43 billion. In terms of GDP, we were under 1.5%, minus 1.5% in 2016. We've gone 2.2% in half year 2019. So when you look at some of these indicators, RDP had achieved its purpose of taking us out of that emergency period. We are on a slow growth, as people will say. But I'll tell people, see, if you are coming from a valley, your capacity to run when you get on the plateau is reduced, But when you start moving, momentum leads to momentum.
Okay. All right, Nee, thank you very much. Kieran, there's an issue I wanted to raise with, I just a joint question, actually, for both Shuaibu Idris and Sheka. Professor Sheka in Kano. Professor Sheka is from Kano, but is with us in our Port Harcourt network studios. Gentlemen, in terms of trying to catalyze the economy, create jobs, and all of that, I was just wondering. We've been hearing about CBN intervention in a number of sectors, particularly the agri sector. We've also heard a lot of promises with regard to the CTG, that is the cotton, textile, and garment industry. But a question arises. In the period that we've been talking about all of this, and this is for several years now, beginning President Goodluck Jonathan's administration up to now, how many new textile factories have been reopened in Kaduna? How many new textile factories have been reopened in Kano? You're from Kano. How many new textile factories have been reopened in Lagos, where Shuaibu Idris is? And how many new jobs have been created? That's one leg. We're borrowing money. Can we not also borrow money to build new refineries and ensure that there are no leakages arising from importation of refined petroleum products? Gentlemen.
Well, actually, as you said, certainly the CBN intervention has been very helpful to the people. I know when the CBN governor had meeting with textile manufacturers, and we also saw how they went and launched assistance loans to farmers in Katsina to produce cotton. But certainly, like we usually say, the intervention, it really goes to the right people. But like you were asking about how many textile industry, really, it was previously more of paperwork than action. But now they have started taking action. And in a very few years, probably in the next 1-2 years, we will see the textile industry coming up. And especially as government is now serious about clothing borders, not allowing textile materials to be imported illegally through land borders and other borders, I think that will be a booster to manufacturers, especially the textile manufacturers. And again, we have noticed, the farmers have also been encouraged by the closing of the borders, and the production of rice had increased. But unfortunately, again, as typical Nigerians, I think that is one of the things that I would want the National Assembly to consider, that the rice farmers in Nigeria are exploiting people. Their prices are just similar to those of the imported rice that have been subjected to duties, transportation, and whatever. So certainly, we expect to see changes now because the CBN had started taking real action. I know the textile manufacturers have met with CBN governor, they met with various governments right from Obasanjo, but there was no real action taken to revitalize the industries. And it's a combination of assistance as well as fiscal policy measures that will encourage or will provide a conducive macroeconomic environment for these textile manufacturers to get back into operation. So certainly it's more of paperwork before, but now actions have started actually being taken. And if you may permit me, I know maybe this may be the last this thing I will do. I would like to also suggest that the critical infrastructure, I think the President did not mention anything to do with construction or expansion of existing dams, which are actually the major infrastructure, that is supporting rice production. That should be done we have a lot of dams that are not functioning because of irrigation infrastructure that have not been provided. If the government can consider that and add it to a critical infrastructure, I'm sure this issue of diversification through agriculture will receive a booster. And of course, again, I would also wish to recommend the social investment that goes directly to the common people. This year's budget is actually does not receive a balanced allocation. There are some regional social investment, like the ones in the Niger Delta area, where the presidential amnesty is offered, 65 billion is allocated, and then the Northeastern Nigeria Development Commission has received 37.8 billion, but the entire nation, the social investment in the entire nation received only 30 billion. And
all right, thank you indeed, Prof. As you rightly pointed out, time is not on our side. Shuaibu, let's bring you in for your closing thoughts on this. Take on the part of the question Kingsley raised and this one. I didn't hear so much about science, technology, and innovation in all of this. And we all know that there is no great nation existing on earth today without indigenous science, technology, and innovation. Reliance on importation of all the machinery required to oil the manufacturing sector cannot possibly yield any good dividend unless you do it yourself. What's your take on this as you do a closing remark?
Kirian, thank you. Number one, I think on Kingsley's question, I will once again say, God bless you for that question. Number one, if you observe a trajectory of the CBN intervention programs, it started with President Obasanjo's tenure when the textile garment industry had an intervention of the first amount of 70 billion naira loans that were given to various, then what we call the textile companies or the cotton producers, be them cotton farmers or ginneries or yarn or spinning mills and the textile. That money literally went down the drain. It wasn't paperwork like Professor Shekar said. Monies were given out to companies. Number two, there was intervention in the aviation industry. Monies were given out from the central bank to some of the companies that were operating in the aviation industry. Needless to say, there were several interventions in the agricultural sector. Have we had an effective monitoring and evaluation mechanism to ascertain to what extent those monies given out were used for the purposes for which they were meant? To what extent did we have the impact that we wanted to have in the national economy, in the ecosystem arising from such intervention? Your guess is as good as mine. Most of those monies were taken and diverted. Were they paid? I wouldn't know. But I do hope that the monies, even though they were not used for the purpose for which they were meant, they should have been paid. Regarding your question, Kirian, on science, technology, and innovation, I think it is a bit of a misnomer, and if not a shame on a nation like Nigeria to have a budget, successive years budget, without any significant attention, either in terms of mention or in allocation as to the need to revitalize our science, technology, and innovation in our ecosystem. This is an era where you have artificial intelligence. This is an era where technology is playing a vital role in virtually every aspect of our lives, and yet we are paying lip attention and lip service to this very important sector of the future of mankind himself, not just Nigeria. If we don't take time, the world, as usual, will move on, and we will be left either in the train station or at the bus station or at the sea or airport without having to board, the train or the plane or the ship. I think there is need for the National Assembly to take a critical look at this budget. Number one, look at the assumptions. Are they realistic? Shouldn't we review and redo the assumptions? Number two, the recurrent expenditure. Professor Obadan did allude to this fact. Should we be borrowing to fund recurrent expenditure? Number three, what is our capital expenditure, and what are those capital expenditures that needs to have some regenerative kind of impact to the economy? And last but not the least, we need to be careful on borrowing, and if we must reduce the borrowing, we must swallow some of the bitter pills. We need to change our exchange rate mechanism. We must not be having dual exchange rate. Number two, we should swallow the bitter pills of removing the oil subsidy so that the 1 to 2 trillion naira that we spend on subsidy can be used instead of borrowing money for our future generations to pay. I believe if the National Assembly should be able to do justice, Mr. President will probably have a rethink and be out of the emotional side that he feels very strongly about, the common man.
All right, Shuaibu Idris in our Lagos Network Center, Professor Garba Ibrahim Sheka joining us from Port Harcourt Studios. Normally he's based in Kano. Professor Michael Badan also here with us in the Abuja studios, normally from our Benin Network Center, and Niyi Akindiju, usually here in the Federal Capital Territory. Gentlemen, would like to appreciate you for your insights into our conversation on the 2020 appropriation bill tabled by Mr. President yesterday at the National Assembly. Of course, there will be many more opportunities to return to the issues arising from the 2020 appropriation bill. Kirian, we also have a number of tweets, but we can only acknowledge the writers who have sent in those tweets.
We have Sani Michael,
G.
Ibrahim Moduaji, Festus Akimboewa, Aminu Inoa, Prince Vicked, Malcolm John, Sani Blarebe. Yes, and the Professor Prince.
All right, so we appreciate your tweets, and thank you also for tuning in to Good Morning Nigeria. The program returns same time tomorrow, 7 o'clock in the morning. Enjoy the rest of your day. I'm Kingsley Osano.
And I'm Kirian Umayo. Have a great day.